So the last thing I want to talk about is casting faults or casting deficiencies. And bear with me on this one because I know all of you at some point have done it, but we've already talked about overpowering your forward cast. That is probably the single biggest, or your back cast for that matter. A nice smooth acceleration to a stop is what we're looking for. There are a couple of things that can happen though after that stop that are very, very common. And the reason I bring these up is because I teach probably 35 guys a year, and I can tell you probably 30 of them do one of these two things. And in the casting instruction world, we call it a creep or a drift. Two different things, but I'll explain them to you. So, creep is bad. And basically what creep is when you come to your stop beside your head, you inadvertently let your hand creep forward. So in slow motion, you're going to come back into your cast, stop, and your hand creeps forward, and it only takes an inch. When Lefty Kreh said, and if you've ever seen Lefty cast, nobody did it like him. He would over-exaggerate it for demonstrations, but when he stopped, it was like he was like stopping time. His hand did not move. That creeped forward. So basically what's happening is, when I come back and I pause long enough for my fly line to straighten out behind me, even coming forward by an inch is going to kill, most guys will do it up to 6 inches, but it's going to kill all the energy that's stored in your rod. So as your rod bends, and fly rods don't bend that much on a standard overhand back cast or forward cast without a haul. It's a very gradual bend, but as the rod loads and I come forward, I pull the line forward with it. Now I'm behind the 8 ball, I've got no energy stored in the rod, and I have to push it to make the cast work. And what happens when you push it? Tailing loops. So that's creep. And like I said, it's very simple. That's a creep right there. And everybody does it. When you come to a stop, if you find yourself doing that, I always tell guys to do one of two things. Say stop in their head. Say stop in your head. Stop. And you will, eventually. Now the other one is what we refer to as drift. And drift will occur naturally, and it's not as bad as creep in some situations. Basically what drift is, it's the opposite of creep. It's when we come back into our cast and allow our hand to just drift back a little bit. When we're casting big heavy rods, big heavy flies, and going for distance, you'll see the distance competitors intentionally drifting. When they come back, as they go into their haul and they come back, they're moving their arm back more only to extend the length of their casting stroke. We are all limited by our physical height. I'm 5'10" and change, and as so I'm 5'10" and change. My casting stroke without a double or without any haul is about this far. So the reason that we introduce a haul, is there anyone unfamiliar with a single, double, or a water haul? So what the haul does, as I said, we're all limited by our physical height. I can cast reasonably well with a standard weight forward line. I can cast with one hand, one arm, with no haul, probably 35, 40 feet, reasonably well. But once I get beyond that, the casting stroke, the distance that my hand is traveling is getting too great for me to do it without adding something to it. So I'm going to back up a little bit. When you're casting short distances, your cast is very is very short and compact, okay? See, my arm and hand is not traveling that far. As I increase in distance, as I keep peeling line off my reel, and I increase the distance, my casting stroke has to be proportionate to the amount of line that I'm carrying in the air, okay? So once I reach my maximum, then I have to add something to it. And I can't do a double haul in here, but I would, if I could get my lovely assistant to just hold that line for me there. Basically what a haul does is, as I'm coming into my back cast, or my forward cast, it doesn't matter, but as I'm coming into my cast, I'm pulling this line down beside me, and that's putting a deeper bend in the rod, which is going to create more line speed. I might be able to, you can let go of that for me. I might actually be able to just show you. If I'm just making an overhand cast like this, you can see the rod tip is not bending that much. This line doesn't slip worth a darn. But the haul, this is a haul. Watch my left hand. So this is a normal overhand cast. This is a haul. See what I do with my left hand? That's a haul. This is a double haul. I'm hauling on both my forward cast and my back cast. And basically what that does is causes the rod to bend much deeper and create more line speed. So I can get to those crazy distances. But
you're also shortening the back cast.
you're shortening both casts. You're shortening both.
Give you more power.
Yes, but it has more to do with with loading the rod deeper than it does with. Yeah, you are. You're shortening. Most casters, I've found over the years, and I know I did it myself. Most casters will start. So a water haul is just basically, as I'm pulling the fly line off the water, I'm hauling, and I've got resistance in the water plus the haul. It makes everything happen much faster. You could get the same thing by just holding your left hand with the line in it down by your side, because as I come into my cast, if I make a cast with the fly line under my finger, if I make a cast here, the fly line is not changing. The length of the fly line is not changing. Watch what happens though when I hold my hand down my left. As I make that cast, that fly line is shortening considerably. And that's basically, as you were saying, that's allowing the rod to bend deeper, create more line speed, and get greater distances, greater accuracy, shoot lines, so on and so forth. So going back to drift, if I have reached my max, now what I need to do is I have to lengthen my casting stroke by actually physically lengthening the casting stroke. And that's drift.
And stepping in
And stepping in and stepping out. You're really maximizing what your own height. Okay? So drift is not a bad thing. Drift can actually take some noise out of a cast. It just sort of smoothens it out. I don't want you to go out and start practicing dropping your hand back unless you're taking an advanced casting course. But don't be too concerned about it if you come back and you got a little bit of a drift in your cast. Where you want to be concerned about is the creep. That's the stop after the cast when you bring your. And you can see it's almost undistinguishable of that, but that's a creep right there, and you're killing your cast doing that. So overpowering your forward cast, creep, drift. The hook, which we've already talked about, bringing the rod tip around like this, and breaking your wrist. If you are perpetually breaking your wrist, a very quick, simple exercise you can do with yourself is close your eyes and make 3 false casts. 1, 2, 3, stop. Look where your reel or your butt is in relation to your wrist. In this case, it's right up against it. So then do the same thing on your back cast. Close your eyes. 1, 2, 3. Stop. Now look where my reel is. It's almost on a 45-degree angle. So I'm breaking my wrist a lot. Then you know you have to do something. Most guys or ladies their wrist will move to some degree. But if it's moving, if you're getting much more than an inch to an inch and a half, depending on the length and the weight of the rod, if you're getting much more than an inch to an inch and a half variance in here, you're breaking your wrist more than you should be. So that's something that you can work on. Okay?
Spot welding helps.
Spot welding helps. I do know some instructors that have had these gloves. I don't like them. I want you to develop on your own and build that muscle memory on your own, unless you have an injury. I know, but I don't like to do that because, like I said,
We'll do that in extreme cases.
in extreme cases, yes. And one thing, I'm gonna give you two, just before I close it off, I'm gonna give you two things that have changed the way I teach. And they both happen to be my own little additions, but they do work. If you find, when you were a kid, maybe even now, your mom always told you to stand straight and maintain good posture. Fly casting, it's the only time I'm going to tell you to slouch a little bit. Just relax. Just relax and go with it, okay? Little slouch. If you find that you're overpowering your cast, underpowering your cast, whether it's the forward cast or the back cast, don't talk about to yourself in terms of percentages. Now, when I'm teaching, I can't say to a guy, because I don't like to use words like strength. You're being a little too strong or you're being a little too fast. Because as I already said, a 5-year-old with dexterity can cast a fly rod. But how do I relay to a student, you need to take a little bit off your forward cast? Now I talk in terms of percentages. And I'll say, okay, Sheldon, slow down. You need to take 25% off your forward cast. That's a lot. That would be a lot. That would be if you were really overpowering your forward cast. I would say, Sheldon, take 25% off, or 15% off, or even 10. But think of, in order to get to that nice, tight, efficient loop, think in terms of percentages. If it's tailing away all the time, then you know you're overpowering it, and you've got to take a certain percentage off that. If it's collapsing in front of you, or your loop is very open, or it's not going or tracking where you want it to track, then you may have to add 15% to it. So slouch, talk in terms of percentage.